Namaskar and welcome back to JLF's Brave New World and to our ongoing series, Voices of Faith. Today, before we begin, I just want to take a moment to recognize and to acknowledge our deepest condolences to Siddharth Shah, who is one of our colleagues at our back end. His father passed away, unfortunately, due to COVID-driven symptoms last evening. And our deepest condolences to him and his family and to the family of Web Context in their time of grief. Meanwhile, Voices of Faith is back on JLF's Brave New World. Our magazine partner for this series is The Week, Journalism with a Human Touch. Our session today is Adi Shankaracharya, Hinduism's greatest thinker, Pavan K. Varma in conversation with Malashri Lal, presented by the Kamini and Bindi Banga Family Trust. Jagad Guru Adi Shankaracharya was born in Kerala and died in Kedarnath, traversing the length of India in his search for the ultimate truth. In a very short life of 32 years, Shankaracharya not only revived Hinduism, but also created the organizational structure for its perpetuation through the mathas he established in Sringeri, Dwaraka, Puri and Joshimatha. In Adi Shankaracharya, Hinduism's greatest thinker, writer and former diplomat Pavan K. Varma engages thoughtfully and innovatively with the saint's philosophy and spiritual practice of Advaita. Referring closely to the source text, Varma shows the Shankaracharya to be a man before his times in analyzing social hierarchies, the environment, and the laws of physics in conversation with writer Malashri Lal. Pavan K. Varma is an award-winning writer diplomat and is now in politics, where he was till recently an MP, a member of parliament, in the Rajya Sabha, India's upper house, an earlier advisor to the Chief Minister of Bihar. He is the author of over a dozen best-selling books, including Ghalib, The Man, the Times, The Great Indian Middle Class, The Book of Krishna, Becoming India, and Chanakya's New Manifesto. He's also served as ambassador in several countries, including Bhutan, has been the director of the Nehru Center in London, the official spokesperson of the Ministry of External Affairs, and Director General of the ICCR. His latest book, which is a bestseller, is The Greatest Ode to Lord Ram, Tulsidas's Ramcharitmanas, selections and commentaries for which we have dedicated for the first time an entire series. Malashri Lal recently retired from her academic and administrative positions at the University of Delhi's English department. She is a member of the English Advisory Board of the Sahitya Academy and the Bharatiya Gyanpeeth's Advisory Committee. Her specialization is in literature, women, and gender studies. Her books include In Search of Sita, Revisiting Mythology, Tagore and the Feminine, A Journey Through Translations, and Finding Radha, The Quest for Love. Lal has been a senior consultant to the Ministry of Culture, to the UGC nominee on committees, and a member of international book award juries. Do remember all our sessions, including the previous ones with Pavan K. Varma on the Ramcharitmanas, are now available on our Facebook page, JLF Litfest, and on our YouTube channel, Jaipur Litfest JLF. Please do remember to ask questions and comment by typing it into the comment section below, and Malashri will pose these off Pavan Varma at the end of the session. Ladies and gentlemen, Adi Shankaracharya, Hinduism's greatest thinker, Pavan K. Varma, in conversation with Malashri Lal, presented by the Kamini and Bindi Banga Family Trust. Malashri, Pavan Varma, over to you.
Thank you very much, Sanjoy, and wonderful to see you again, Pavan. This is a great book, reads most eloquently and beautifully, and so very informative. Now, Pavan, this particular book was your 21st. It's a magnificent corpus of writing that you have on a variety of subjects. And as Sanjoy just mentioned, and we know, Being and Becoming Indian, Chanakya, Mirza Ghalib, Tulsidas's Ramayana, which we're all talking about these days, and Krishna, and then also a poem about and with the characters of Yudhishthir and Draupadi. So with this wide range that you have, what made you choose to write on Jagad Guru Adi Shankaracharya, the 8th century philosopher, and he was a peripatetic teacher? And you have, in fact, named him Hinduism's greatest thinker.
Thank you, Malashri. It's a great be in conversation with you once again. Why did I choose Adi Shankaracharya? Because I think of the audacity of thought with which he is associated, the cerebral energy with which he elaborated upon the powerful Advaita school of Hindu philosophy, the notion of Brahm, and on the reality of this world, shows a remarkable intellect. And that is why I consider him one of the greatest thinkers, not only in the Hindu tradition, but among philosophers anywhere in the world. So, one, of course, is his remarkable intellectual output.
Pavan, sorry to intervene. I think there's another instrument that's open in one of your desks, and we're hearing the echo back. Malashri, is that? Do you have another instrument? Just put that on silent if you can. Thank you.
Yeah.
Pavan, sorry. Go ahead.
No. The second was I was fascinated also by his life. You know, he was born in Kaladi in Kerala, deep in the south of Bharat, and he attained to Samadhi in the furthermost northern areas of India, which is Kedarnath, and lived a short life of 32 years. And it was fascinating for me how somebody in the 8th century walked across the length and breadth of India, propagating and propounding his philosophical thought through the instrumentality, if I may add, the civilized instrumentality of shastrarth, of debate, of dialogue, of sabhya samvad, civilized discourse, and who in this short life, apart from doing that, reviving Hinduism also, he set up 4 mathas in south in Sringeri, in the west in Dwaraka, in the east in Puri, and in the north at Joshimatha, which in a sense outlined the civilizational map of Bharatvarsh, which, of course, the British mistakenly took credit for, that they created India. Here was in the 8th century the civilizational map of India. So, for these reasons, I thought it would be good to investigate his life, his teachings, the context to his teachings, the follow up to his teachings. And I also know, Malashri, you know it as well as I do. We don't know enough about our civilizational and intellectual legacies. So, in a sense, that book helps to fill that gap.
Very interesting observations, Pavan. And if I may ask you about your personal journey following the track of Shankaracharya, it's most unusual for a researcher and writer to go and visit so many places that are associated with this person, and very little is actually documented in absolute terms about the life of the Shankaracharya. But you took the trouble and you had the dedication and devotion to visit all the places that he was linked with. Did you discover new signposts? Did you come upon things that were never documented before about Shankaracharya?
Well, I did not want to present Adi Shankaracharya's life as a dry chronological narrative. I wanted to actually travel spiritually with him from Kaladi, where he was born in Kerala, to where he walked next, which is Omkareshwar on the banks of the Narmada, where today, even today, you have the cave where he is supposed to have lived after joining the hermitage of his Guru Godpad. And from where he journeyed on then towards Varanasi, his travels to the four mutts, his frequent trips to Badrinath. Uh, I wanted to travel with this and to go to these places. Now, we are not, as Indians, very good at keeping historical records. And what we have perhaps have been lost. You'll be surprised that the great Chanakya's Arthashastra, no copy was left, thanks to two successive conquests of India. Much was destroyed. Uh, and in a copy of the Arthashastra was accidentally discovered only in the early part of the 20th century in Kerala. Otherwise, for all practical purposes, the Arthashastra was lost. So similarly, while we have a few hagiographies about Adi Shankaracharya written later by his disciples, uh, historical compilation of his life does not really exist in terms of evidence. So I wanted to go and see. I wanted to see in Omkareshwar what remains of, there is the beautiful Shiva temple there, but next to it, the cave, to go and see it. I went to Varanasi. I went to the Ghats where he's supposed to have lived. I tried to find out where he could have lived, on which Ghat, and why, which is described in my book. I visited the four mutts and so on and so forth. So, uh, for me, it was a journey by which I was discovering his life and also seeing. For instance, there is the famous dialogue between Adi Shankaracharya and Mandan Mishra, as you are aware, between two schools of thought, the school of Karmakand and the school of Jnanamarg. Adi Shankaracharya's Jnanamarg as against Mandan Mishra's Karmakand school. Now, where did this debate take place? There are two schools of thought. One says Mandan Mishra belonged to Bihar. The other says that no, it happened in Mahishmati, not far from Omkareshwar, along the banks of the Narmada, near the city of Maheshwar. So I wanted to see. And I went, and you'll be surprised that along the Narmada, there are at least three spots which people have put up statues of Adi Shankaracharya and created a kind of commemoration to the fact that the samvad or the dialogue, the great dialogue, took place at this spot. And then I wanted to compare evidence, the local evidence, the anecdotal evidence. So it was a very interesting voyage for me, a voyage of discovery also, to do this.
This idea of dialogue, and what you very correctly say, the cerebral energy of Shankaracharya's way of presenting issues. Do you think this kind of debate and dialogue is really the source of knowledge? Because some knowledge is experiential, there's another kind of knowledge which comes from understanding the material that is around one, whether it's philosophy, religion, inheritance. So when we're talking about Shankaracharya's dialogues and debates, this story about his debate with Madan Mishra's wife, Saraswani, is quite interesting because it's on sexuality. And this lady challenges a celibate monk to enter into a discussion on sexuality. Now, how is he going to do that? And as you described so beautifully, that there is this story, apocryphal or whichever way one wants to look at it, perhaps as a parable, that Shankaracharya actually entered the body of a dead hedonist king. And through that experience of the king in his harem, the Shankaracharya imbibed knowledge of sexuality. And then coming back to his present form as Shankaracharya, he was able to debate with Saraswati and to defeat her in that debate. So this kind of a legend brings to mind the inventiveness of the person, the imagination of the person, the ability to extend oneself into another state of being, which is very difficult, but also very important. So, do you think that stories like these in Shankaracharya's life are really parables for how we acquire knowledge?
I would think so, but they illustrate a larger point. In any case, this is one of the stories. I don't like the word mythology, but if you use the word parable, which are illustrative of another set of principles. You know, in the Hindu worldview, there are four Purusharthas: Dharma, Artha, Kama, Moksha. In other words, along with Dharma, right conduct, broadly, Shishtachar. Artha, the pursuit of material well being. Similarly, for the pursuit of desire, there is philosophical acceptance not in exclusion but as part of a balanced life. And if each of the first three are pursued in proportion, you will move towards moksha as part of this balanced life. So, such a story, whether it's parable or it's apocryphal, illustrates that Adi Shankaracharya, who was from a renunciate, and he was a celibate monk, as you said. When in debate, no subject is taboo, and when Mandan Mishra loses his wife Ubhay Bharti, which illustrates another set of principles, which is however we may treat women in real life, there was in our tradition uh, 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 an acceptance that God and goddess, man and woman, Purush and Prakriti, uh, Chitta and Chitta Rupani, they are two sides of the same coin enjoying equal status, and hence the notion of the androgynous notion of Ardhanareshwar also. So Ubhay says, my husband may have lost, but he is one part of me and I am one part of him. And even though I was an umpire for that uh, philosophical competition between Mandan Mishra and Adi Shankaracharya, now in my capacity as being one half of him, I would like to continue this dialogue. And then she tests him with regard to his knowledge on sexual matters, and it is part of the way parables explain certain world views that Shankaracharya is supposed to have been reincarnated himself in the dead body of a hedonist prince. And in fact, typically of Hinduism, even his biographers mention that once he is in the palace, now in the form of that revived prince who had died, he enjoys the pleasures of the senses in the palace, and in fact begins to enjoy them so much that he forgets what his real mission is, and he has to be reminded by his followers who come and chant Nirgun bhajans for him to realize that he has to move on from here. So it's one of the ways. Hinduism, please understand, is a very eclectic religion and an even more eclectic philosophy. That does not mean that it is ambivalent about certain notions, but that it is willing to accept in propagating those notions a great deal a great deal of a great spectrum of points of view. Again, you mentioned the dialogue of Mandan Mishra, but all the foundational texts of Hinduism are dialogue. The Upanishads are a dialogue, the Bhagavad Gita is a dialogue, the Brahma Sutras are a dialogue. This dialogic civilization, when we say it, is not that dialogues continue eternally without a conclusion, but that conclusions are reached through the process of a civilized dialogue. So, Mandan Mishra and Adi Shankaracharya may be at poles apart in terms of their philosophies, but they were willing to sit down and discuss it. That is the important takeaway from this.
These are stories that are reflecting on the tradition of Hindu civilization and philosophy. But your book also reaches out to another edge of knowledge. And that is when you talk of the Adi Shankaracharya's philosophy of Advaitism as being aligned to modern scientific discoveries. I found that chapter absolutely fascinating. You say, for instance, that there is the example of Stephen Hawking that you take. You also mention Niels Bohr, and you have linked their ideas on quantum physics to the lurking of something indeterminate in the physical universe that the Adi Shankaracharya's philosophy also talks about. So, in making this kind of a link, how do you connect the heritage of Hinduism on one hand and the scientific discoveries which have come from the West on the other?
No. This, when I make the correlation with some of the most recent discoveries of modern science and say and argue with evidence from my point of view that they validate certain seminal concepts of the Advaita school of philosophy, in essence, on what is the ultimate reality and what this world is. I do that on the basis of certain premises. For instance, what does the Advaita school says? It makes an audacious leap of the human imagination based on the deepest insights at moments of intense meditational perceptions. It says that this cosmos, this whole world, the only eternal reality is Brahm. Brahm is a cosmic consciousness without form. So the search is not for God. The search is for ultimate truth. That cosmic consciousness, it goes even further to say, is attributeless, nirgun. It is adrisht, unseen. It is achintya, beyond thought. It is akhand, indivisible. It is purna, complete in itself. It is anant, eternal. It is nirvishesh chinmatram, undifferentiated pure consciousness. It is sarva pratyay darshanin, supremely intelligent. So that is the premise, first premise, Brahm. And it's only inferential experience for those who spiritually evolve and experience Brahm Anubhav is Chid Anand, unblemished bliss and total awareness. Now, it's an assertion. And then the Advaita school says, if that is the only reality, then what is this world about? As Mirza Ghalib asks, जबकि तुझ बिन नहीं कोई मौजूद तो ये हंगामा ए खुदा क्या है? What is all this? This bewildering plurality of the cosmos, my little life, your little life, birth and death and all the multiplicity of empirical emotional phenomena that surround an individual's life. What is it? And so in Advaita philosophy, they say that that is the real, and what we see unfolding as part of our lives is, but is not. Why? Because it is transient, it is ephemeral, it will come and go. जो अस्थाई है, जो अस्थिर है, वो अनंत नहीं हो सकता. So only Brahm is Anand, and the real world in which we live, which we mistakenly take as the only reality, forgetting what you and I consist of. Because in Advaita, he says, I am Atma Brahm, Aham Brahmasmi. I and that cosmic consciousness essentially are the same. My Atma, my inner being, my silent, still Chitta, which is only bliss and only joy, is identical and a part of that Brahm. We were born blissful, we will die into bliss. The interregnum, which is passing, transient, and ephemeral, is the reality which we begin to take as real. Why does that happen? According to Advaita, it happens because of avidya, which is a dosha, an error of perception. So we mistake the rope for the serpent. The famous analogy, the serpent and the rope. Now, why do I say it is and is not? So long, Malashri, that we think that the rope is a serpent. Think. The serpent exists in our mind. The moment we understand that this serpent is not a serpent, but just a rope, the serpent ceases to exist. Similarly, correct perception, because avidya is the creation of Maya. Maya is very powerful. It is also anadi and anant. The creation of Maya is the creation of the illusion of the transient as real. That is the essence of Maya. As Tulsidas says, Main arumor tor te Maya. This whole division between you and I and mine is the creation of our transient minds. Why does that happen? Because of adhyash. Adhyash is the error of perception, what the error of perception causes. It consists of two parts. Allow me to finish, because I can't explain science unless I explain the basic principle. If there's no time, I'll stop. But then you're asking me an important question. So adhyash,
go ahead.
adhyash happens in two ways. Avaran, which is the creating of a veil over the real, and vikshep, distortion of reality into what it is not. And a combination done of these two creates a situation where we begin to take the unreal for the real and ignore what is the reality of our being, which remains that of the Atma, which is identical to Brahm. Now, very briefly, because I can hold 3 lectures on science alone and Advaita. So I'm just going to say very briefly to you, what is modern science saying today? That the universe is Anant and infinite. Brahm is Anant without beginning or end and infinite. For a long time, the universe was thought to be finite, if huge but finite. Today, modern science is saying that the universe continues to miraculously expand every second. Where does it create space? Where is it expanding into like a balloon with dots on it? You blow in it, the dots keep expanding. So it is infinite. In fact, Stephen Hawking talks of not one universe, but multiverses. Similarly, it is eternal because scientists want a beginning and an end, but the Big Bang was one beginning. But today, scientists are questioning that theory. If there's a Big Bang, why can't there be a big crunch, which brings everything back? And then it starts again, just like the Hindu philosophical notion of creation, sustenance, destruction, pralay, and the cycle begins again. Time is cyclical. It's being proved by science today. Then it is supremely intelligent, as Brahm is, I told you, Sarva Pratyay Darshanin. We see that the way the cosmos works, there is a supreme intelligence guiding it. Just see the change of seasons, morning, night, etc. Then it is indivisible. Now, many experiments have been carried out. And one of the most famous ones was the EPR experiment, the Einstein-Podolsky-Rosen experiment, which shows that two nuclei, when in the same axis, spin immediately when put in the same axis, counterwise or clockwise. It could be that one is in New Delhi and the other in Toronto. So there is, how does this information pass? It is more than the speed of light. But it is there. There is an indivisibility to the universe. Science is proving it. Then the whole notion of Advaita, that what you see is not what it is. With the advent of, you see, quantum physics, Newton began a predictable universe. And after that, quantum physics unraveled it. Einstein came along, who said that even time and space are relative. You know, matter and energy are interchangeable. They can either be a particle or a wave. 96% of the universe consists of dense matter. We, in our current form, the form is just empty space with waves of energy. So what we see is not what it is. This is what quantum physics has shown, and this is exactly what Advaita says. I explained the concept of avidya. And then the basic premise of Advaita is that there is an all-pervasive consciousness pervading the cosmos. So what does Max Planck say, the scientist? He says consciousness is primary. Now this is a nuclear physicist, a physicist. Consciousness is primary, matter is derivative. What does Edward Schrödinger says? And he's a Nobel laureate in science. He says the unitary consciousness pervades the universe. So science is saying the universe is not explicable unless you admit the primacy of consciousness, an all-pervasive cosmic consciousness. In fact, it's so the correlation is so unreal, it takes you aback. And finally, when we say that the experience of Brahm Anubhav, creates in you that unblemished joy and bliss, experiments have been carried out in America and other advanced neurology labs, where they do a speck of the brain of a person, a trained meditationer who is just about to go in the intense moments of meditation. They map the brain and everything changes, and the experience that is inferential is, as described by Andrew Newberg, is that of an absolute unitary sense of being. an indivisibility which is pure joy without the difference at the empirical level of this Jagat Prapanch, which is the Maya based world. So you are part of that one. That is the feeling you have.
So we'll come. There are questions pouring in, Pavan. So
Okay,
I
okay.
and I have so many of my own, which I will have to hold aside. But you're very right in saying that the Shankaracharya is a person before his time. And there are sections in your book which took me aback. For instance, he talks about caste being an aspect of character and not of birth. He talks about the power of women, the prakriti, the urja. The equality of women. These are ideas which seem to be way ahead of his time. And now, when you've explained so eloquently the link between Advaita and quantum physics, it just strikes one as so amazing that the thinking of philosophy and science was coming so close together in his mind. So, one final question from me, because then we'll move on to the queries that are here on the chat box. So, is there an objective to your book? Because it seems, on one hand, it's a very convincing argument for looking again at the inclusiveness of Hinduism as it was in the Adi Shankaracharya's time and as it was in the inheritance that came to him. On the other hand, it's a book which is saying also that there is a contemporary link between religion and scientific principles. So both are true, and it's amazing when I read the book, it comes together. But did you have any particular objective in writing this book?
My objective was to first educate myself. Secondly, understand the remarkable, as I used the word earlier, intellectual legacy of a man who, without doubt, belongs to the first lines of cerebral philosophy in the world. But we don't know enough about it. That's
So
why I wrote a book.
let me take the question because people are eagerly waiting.
Yes.
So may I?
Yes, please.
So there is a question from Reba Shom. She says, despite the North-South cultural tensions in India, how is it that the priestly tradition of Shankaracharya still holds sway in Kedar or Badri?
Sorry?
How is it that the priestly tradition of the Shankaracharya still holds sway in Kedar or Badri? She's talking about the North-South cultural tensions in India. So how is it that this tradition still continues to hold emphasis in the North?
North-South tensions can be a passing or a temporary political phenomenon. But the civilizational unity of India or Bharatvarsh transcends these divisions. I mean, it's not only about Adi Shankaracharya. Vallabhacharya, the great Krishna Bhakt of the Bhakti school, is a Telugu. And who came to Mathura? Chaitanya went to the south. So, if you look at the pan-Indian footprint of Hinduism, you will be surprised at the level of uh, cultural and philosophical and spiritual unity. So, these are North-South tensions may uh, uh, may be a matter of passing phenomenon, but the unity is undoubted.
There's another interesting question from Kavita Tomar. What was Adi Shankaracharya's interaction with other faiths of the time? Buddhists, for example.
Yeah, he was himself considered uh, a klepto-Buddhist. You see, at the level of philosophy, there are many overlaps between Hinduism and Buddhism. If you take a mechanical view of Buddhism, which denies the Atma, Anatma, which denies the permanence of any factor, Kshanikvad, and with the Advaita school or of Hinduism, you will see differences, but ultimately the notion of shunyat, the void, which later Buddhist philosophers developed out of Gautam Buddha's philosophy, Nagarjuna and others. Shunyat is identical with Brahm because the only thing is Shunyat, the void is nihilistic, whereas Brahm is pure, unblemished bliss and awareness. That's the only difference. Buddhism's beej word is dukkha, and the way out of dukkha, the way out of sorrow. Hinduism's beej word is anand. You are anand. You will be in anand if you can see through the reality around you, and you will merge with anand. Otherwise, there are great overlaps. So, in Omkareshwar, when he joined the hermitage of Gaudapad, it was accused of being uh, much too akin to Buddhism, and Shankaracharya was influenced by it. There is also another mythology, Mithya Swarupa, that is being perpetuated, that Hinduism and Buddhism were at war with each other. That Hinduism was destructive of Buddhism. It did not so happen. Buddhism left India because it was in serious danger of being absorbed within Hinduism. Buddha was considered the last avatar of Vishnu. So, Hinduism has that quality, and I have the highest respect for Buddhism. But the fact of the matter is that Hindu kings patronize Buddhist monasteries. They patronize Jain monasteries. In one family of a reigning monarch, one was Buddhist, one was Hindu. So there was no great religious war against Buddhism. Yes, there was debate. Even in Hinduism, there are 6 systems of Hindu philosophy. You know that. The Nyaya, Vaisheshik, the Sankhya Yoga, the Purva Mimansa, the Uttar Mimansa. Adi Shankaracharya was Uttar Mimansa. There was debate between these. There was debate also, sometimes pretty vociferous, between the Shaiv school and the Vaishnav school. These
debate and dialogue seems to be the way to move forward.
The Charvak school, and with a lot of freedom, the Charvak school in Hinduism said that the Vedas themselves are lies. So you have to have, even Shankaracharya could say, na mantro na tirtham na vedo na yagna. Nothing matters, na mantra, na tirth, na ved, na yagna. All that matters is Chidananda Rupa, Shivoham Shivoham.
Well, that's the right note on which to bring the session to a close. Thank you very much, Pavan. That's been most enlightening. As always, a great pleasure to hear from you on this wide map of intellectual understanding of Hinduism and all the discussion and the dialogue that goes into it. And thank you for a most insightful, informative, and an enjoyable read that your book is.
Thank you, Malashri.
Thank you very much, Malashri Lal. Thank you very much, Pavan Varma. And, this is such a brilliant conversation. I hope people, especially in Madhya Pradesh and of the political ilk, also listen to this series, take a page out of your book, perhaps read it, if possible, when they go to create their laws about or their inquiries into people kissing in a religious place of religious worship. On that note, thank you. I mean, that was really in so many ways so illuminating. Thank you, Kamini and Vindi Banga Family Trust, for supporting this very important series to be able to illuminate people about what Hinduism and its philosophy actually means and take it away, perhaps, and take it back from what we see today, a place of where violence is perpetrated in the name of religion. Thank you all for watching and being such a great audience. The next session in this series will be broadcast on 30th of November at 7:30 p.m. IST. And do remember, even as we speak, JLF North America continues to roll out. We've finished JLF Colorado, we've completed JLF Houston, And we open with JLF New York later today and in America time tomorrow morning. So please remember to just register online, and you can do so on the JLF LitFest pages. JLF New York is November 23rd to 24th, and Toronto, November 27th to 29th. Thank you. Stay masked, stay safe.